the Rainbow Pump. It's one of the simplest designs out there, one of the oldest still in use, and one of the most reliable. Good evening, everybody. This is Chris from Aeromech. Just wanted to go over my particular Rainbow Pump and just make some of you guys a little bit more familiar with the homemades. I know I've brought them out and showcased them just a little bit. Haven't really gone into an in-depth explanation of any one of these. I started building homemades about a year ago, and I just kind of fell in love with it, even more than modding. Modding is still fun, but this is definitely more what I enjoy doing. Just because you start from zero, you can tune something to exactly the way you want it, and the end result is incredible because you put so much time into it, and it's tailored to something that you want and that you designed from the start to finish. So let's begin with this one. Why call it a rainbow or a rainbow pump? Well, it's pump action, so that's where the pump comes from. Rainbow comes from the style of catch it uses, and I'll go over that in just a minute. But basically, the rainbow catch is made out of a couple pieces of polycarbonate, and I'll just let this off. A couple pieces of polycarbonate, so it's rather strong material, and I prefer them over the snap style, which is the clothespin. You'll see some of them with a clothespin as the trigger group. I just prefer the rainbows. I find it a little bit more reliable. It's not as prone to break on you, at least in the trigger area. So if something breaks, I don't necessarily have to open the blaster apart completely to fix it. This is using clear PVC because it was one of my first blasters, and all my future models and all the ones I built from this one on have used opaque PVC. The pump is made out of polyester or PETG, so it's also clear, but because it's clear, it goes to show you exactly how the blaster operates. So this one is also a little bit different from your traditional ones because the handle is not attached to the body tube at all. The handle is actually attached to the sheath, and the purpose of the sheath is basically to put your face right here and not have this pump grind against your face or hit you in the face over here. So I like the sheaths, however it adds a good amount of weight. Even if you were to drill holes in this, it's a lot more weight because this is 2-inch PVC. It's nice and thick, so it's never really going to break on you, but keep in mind that will add some weight if you choose to build one of these on your own. And again, I will link a lot of the build guides in the description. There are more than a few different guides and tutorials on how to build these. And I may make a video on something like this if there is enough, there's enough demand. This is held in the back by a PVC T using 4 screws. I have already unscrewed 3 of the 4 screws just to speed this up a little bit. And I'll leave this screw in just a little bit so there's no separation between the T and the sheath. And with just a little convincing, the receiver, what I'm going to call it, with the trigger group and handle, comes off, and we are left with the body tube and pump right here. And again, usually the handle would be located right here, but I decided on mine that I wanted it separate, so you can disassemble it like this. Now we can see a little bit more how this works. Focusing just on the catch here, you can see a little notch in this plunger rod here, right over here. So when this is pumped back, the catch has a little spring in it that pushes this way. So it's almost like a little finger in there. So then, when this is pumped back, watch this screw, and it's actually going to pop out because that spring forces it out and forces that finger to catch into that notch. Just like that. When we pump forward again, we have now created our air chamber, of course. So this air is going to be jettisoned out the front of our barrel and propel your homemade dart at 220 to 250 FPS. And let me just fire this off right now. Whoa. The things that happen, the hopper just flew off. But this is a pretty nice design, and going over a couple of the other things, this is the steel rod in the back. You'll see it's bent a good 60 degrees, 30 degrees off maybe from where it originally was. However, this is both good and bad. it means that the steel is succumbing to just the forces of the pump, but that also means that this has been work hardened by the pump, or cold worked. So it's actually less likely to deform any more from its current state than if you would just get a new piece of steel. If that's really bugging you, just open it up, drift this out, and put in a new piece of steel. It's not a big deal, but it has no effect on the function of the blaster whatsoever. I've used this in so many different wars, and it has yet to do anything foul to me. This string here is something that you may also see in other blasters. However, I've it positioned a little bit differently. This is called a string stop. The reason it's called a string stop is because it literally stops the plunger head from advancing all the way to this bushing here. I'm just going to pump this back to show you. This bushing in the front is held in by these 4 screws. And this is clear PVC, so it's a little more brittle than opaque PVC. We don't want this plunger head slamming into this if we dry fire it, or in this case, if there's a free way for the air to flow. We don't want this just slamming in there. We want something to stop it right before it hits this bushing. And that's what this string is for. You can see because it's open now, it's kind of fallen out, but that's never really an issue when the sheath is on there. So this string is of a known length, and I'm actually going to pull the trigger right now and not get my hand in the way. There we go. And it's still going to be loud, it's still going to fire, but the idea is that this string stops this plunger from advancing right before the plunger head, this part, hits the bushing, so it's not going to crack or damage this in the long run if you dry fire it by accident. It's just a simple little thing that you can add to your blaster to make it a little more reliable, a little more durable in the long term. You see, I have the string actually going through this rear half-inch bushing in the back. A lot of times you'll see string on the PVC-T in the rear, and it'll be going through here and here. This particular one, I wanted to be able to disassemble this without any issue or without having to undo the string and ruin the length and have to retie it and retest it. So I just made it a good length, tied it here, so now it's completely removable, and you don't even have to worry about untying it from the stock. Inside here is just a standard K26 spring, which you can get from McMaster-Carr. And one other thing to note, while we have the guy open, are these speed holes. If the blaster is pumped back and these speed holes weren't here, because this is a very good seal, almost a perfect seal, you would get a vacuum forming between the seal and the catch, or a near vacuum. So these holes allow air to flow in, so air can flow this way. If it didn't have that, the plunger head would actually be slowed down to a near stop. And I'm going to put my finger over the barrel after we put the hopper back on and show you what kind of a seal this is. It's pretty good, even though this thing is almost a year old. So it moves a little bit, and if that was a perfect seal, it wouldn't move at all. I do need to re-lubricate this though, because I haven't done that in forever. I'm going to put this one screw back in, and we'll go to a brief discussion of what to do if you want to build this particular blaster yourself, some of the resources you can go to, and some of the hardships that I personally experienced while building this blaster, so you can be a little bit more informed if you want to do it. In this particular case, I just needed to line up this alignment hole here, so I know that this thing is going back on in the correct orientation, and I'll quickly screw this screw in here. For ease of build, I think this could be one of the easier ones to build that is not a snap. Keep in mind that a snap style blaster is probably going to be one of the easiest blasters to build. I, however, prefer rainbows, and this is kind of just a personal preference of mine. If you're a good snap builder, or if you've never built anything before, or if you're not as handy with tools as you would like to be, start with a snap. It's less investment for you. The first one of these I made, I ended up spending $90 on McMaster-Carr, and that was just for basic stuff because I didn't have it. But if you want to make multiple ones of these, a sheet of polycarbonate, let's say a 12 by 12 sheet, would be maybe $10 or $12, just ballparking it out there. If you make one catch, that means that you spent $12 on one catch. But the catch is only about 1.25 inches in its size, or diameter. So if you make 10 catches or 20 catches, now the price goes way down. In terms of the ease of the build, again, not it's a little bit more difficult than a snap, but once you get it working, man, this thing will chug. I really love this. I've handed this out as a loaner to many different nerfers that did not have a blaster or needed a loaner for that day. If someone else's blaster breaks, usually they get something like this, and it's incredible. This thing, again, will rock between 220 and 250 FPS using my particular darts, and that varies a little bit depending on what you use. In terms of overall length, it's about 28 inches from the front of the pump to the rear of the stock, and if we add our 12-inch barrel onto here, it's about 39.5. That is one of the downsides, the disadvantages to something like this. It's that it is much longer because everything is in line. It's not a bullpup design where the barrel would be on top, or a semi-bullpup design like a double rainbow where the barrel is situated on top of the barrel. It's something you just have to live with. However, this is one of the simplest blasters that you can get. In that case, there's very little that can go wrong, and if something does go wrong, you can pretty much tell what it is. There are fewer parts, less machining that needs to go into it. So, if you want to build that, definitely a great starting point. Some of the limitations I already touched upon, just because it is a little heavier from the sheath, much longer. It would not really be ideal for an indoors environment unless you were used to dipping the thing down to go around corners through doors. But basically, you have a pretty long musket here if you're going to use it like that. It's already touched upon affordability, the name. This is my rainbow pump. I'll link again some of the build guides on Nerf Haven if you wanted to build your own. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments. And this is Chris from Aeromech. Have a great night.